Hello, this is Property Matters, a weekly catch-up on all matters property, supported by Fairview International Property Consultancy and auctionproperty.co.uk. And we're live every Sunday on YouTube and Facebook and on our website, propertymatterstv.co.uk at 10 a.m. sharp. And if you're watching on our website, don't forget to hit that Google review button, please, and give us a nice review on the homepage. You can also leave your comments in the comments section wherever you're watching us today. And if you'd like to get in touch, the email address, hello@propertymatterstv.co.uk. You can also get Property Matters as a podcast from any of these main platforms that you can see on the right-hand side of the screen. And also we're live on Dilset Radio, I believe, every day as well. So looking forward to your comments today on the show. Property Matters, of course, every week with our special property expert. That, of course, is Joe Joshi. And we say, hi, Joe.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, Paul. And yes, we are live on Dilse Radio at 10 o'clock every day. So that's a new area. So it's dilseradio.com. And so, yeah, we want to be available wherever we can to make sure that we cover all the aspects of property and give the guidance and advice as much as we can.
There's somebody else that's working very hard on a Sunday morning today, and that's our Natasha. We mentioned her last week, Natasha Cooper-Smith, who's running the London Marathon as we speak. So if she's a really strong runner, she'll be sub 4, so she should finish just before midday today. Or if she's a little bit beyond that, she might be just perhaps coming up to 1 o'clock. So where do we think she's going to be at this point, Joe?
Well, you know, fingers crossed. When we finish this program, of course, I'll be back on to trying to cheer her through the system. But I think hopefully about 1 o'clock, the way it's shaping up. But the good thing is that she's done really well in raising funds for the mental health that she's running for, supported and sponsored by us, of course, as auctionproperty.co.uk. So a little last push from all of our listeners, viewers, friends and family, etc., to make sure that we can reach her target of £2,000, which I'm sure we will by the end of the day she runs, or just after. But great cause, great effort, and cheering her on.
Yeah, and that page is www.justgiving.com/fundraising/Natasha Cooper-Smith. So we wish her well, as she's probably about halfway around by now, I would imagine. So we'll carry on working alongside, so to speak, with our stories. And I thought this was of interest this week. Certain areas of the property market in England and Wales are providing a lifeline, Joe, to potential home buyers who are finding it hard to climb the property ladder. This is new research from Way Home Analysis. They looked at property affordability across each postcode in England and Wales, comparing the change in the house price to income affordability, and setting that in a ratio against interest rates starting from December 2021. And the analysis found that across England and Wales as a whole, house prices have risen by 8.5% since December 2021. The average house now requires 7.3 times the average household income of £41,900 to cover the average house price of £305,065, which is a 0.6% increase in affordability ratio since the interest rate started to rise last year. However, in many pockets of the property market, house prices have fallen substantially, providing a boost to housing affordability to those looking to buy in those areas. For example, Gwynedd in LL46 in Wales, North Wales, the average house price has fallen apparently 32.7% since December 2021, the largest house price slide of all postcodes in England and Wales. So today the average house price sits at 7.3 times the average household income, down from 10.8 times income in December 21, which is a 3.5% drop. So it seems that we're all off to Gwynedd. So I had a quick look, Joe, before we go and do that. So let's just have a look at, here's some properties. All reduced look on there. This is, I think this is on the market, actually. So we got there a 1-bedroom terrace house for sale, freehold, quaint mid-terrace cottage. That's the one in the middle there, 164,950. Got a rather nice chapel conversion, 4-bed, 2-bathroom property, dating from 1867. Mind you, considering the prices are supposed to have been dropping, 499,950 It's a big building, I guess, and probably done nicely, but it seems a bit rich. But then a 3-bedroom detached house for sale, which is your typical fodder, I guess, 325,000, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. So what do you make of that, Joe?
Well, it's interesting actually, and it's good that you brought those comparables on the screen for those listening as well on the podcast. That it's actually not that dissimilar to a lot of the other areas. I mean, if that is the lowest and the largest drop in the house prices, and at that level, you'd be quite surprised if you do your research. Those that are looking to buy or getting their first foot on the run of the property ladder, you will find that there are many other areas that offer you comparable properties, perhaps not out in Gwynedd in Wales alone. If you go towards the Midlands and up north, and even slightly up north from the perimeter of the home counties, as they say, there are choices, there are availabilities. It may not be with the views of Gwynedd, perhaps out in the remote valleys of Wales, but certainly value for money. You would get quite good. And yes, in this particular case, they have looked at the overall annual fall since the interest rates have been going up, and it's quite substantial. But in reality, for £300,000 or £400,000, you are able to find relatively good homes in other areas. I think the main concern here would be affordability, Paul. That's the bottom line. That the numbers say that house prices have dropped, and they are probably having a bit of a correction from my point of view. But certainly, it's the affordability that we need to sort of try and understand.
Yeah, so we look at this is basically Llanfair and also Harlech. So as in Men of Harlech, and actually having Googled it, it's a beautiful, beautiful part of the country, probably quite remote. But this little 2-bedroom house for sale at the top here, very typical of the local stone. So this is sort of a grey, almost like Cotswold type of stone, I guess, for those that are listening. And it's a beautiful little 2-bed cottage, 200,000. There's a 3-bed house for sale here that's terraced, 275,000 with a garage. Sea views over Cardigan Bay. So I mean, it's not a bad part of the country, Joe. I mean, it's probably the issue is that there isn't a lot of demand, perhaps because it's quite remote up there. But 2-bed detached bungalow for sale, 225. Nice retirement property, perhaps.
I think those are certainly attractive, and like you say, it's the type of construction, perhaps the stone construction, and then of course the views and the general quality of life that may come with it. But for first-time buyers or people that are looking to step on the first run of the property ladder, it's maybe not where they need to be, depending on their work commitment. Paul, if they're working and they're working for an operation or a company that is based in a town, doesn't matter what town, doesn't necessarily have to be London. It could be Birmingham, it could be Manchester, it could be any of those towns. Then the travel and all the other amenities will matter. But it's a great downsizer for those that want to downsize, because they could get good money for their property where they are and actually end up buying a very nice property for the value in an area that is remote and fresh air, etc. So it's good from lots of different points of view, but certainly I would be showing concern for those that are looking to get their first foot on the run of the property ladder.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at this data. I think this is from Rightmove. So here's a property in Harlech, a semi-detached property. So it sold in 2018, in January 2018, for 218,000. But it sold just 3 years later in December 2021 for 367.
Yeah.
So that says that although prices might be falling now, there's still been some significant gains even over that period of time. So that's in 3 years. It's an almost a 50% increase in value. On the other side of it, there is also, if you want to look for bargains, the survey reports the fact that the Test Valley, SO20, so Hampshire's Test Valley, has seen a 22.5% drop in property values, leading to a fall in house affordability benchmark from 13.3 times household income to 10.3 today. Still a big ask, though, 10 times salary, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, these numbers are really quite colossal. When I think that, when I started in the property market, three plus one was basically it. Three times main earner, one plus the second earner, and now it's joint income of 7 or 8 times, which is quite it's double the time that it was, and you're still not achieving the amount of borrowing because now, in lending purposes, other aspects like affordability and other utility costs and all sorts of other things are taken into consideration. So theoretically, you're probably not even seven, you might even be 10 times your income in order to make sure that you're actually making the numbers in the first place. And that's the challenging time for all of the first-time buyers, and the amount of deposit pool, and that's where Bank of Mum and Dad have been coming in and rescuing, because that's where the deposits are coming from. Because it's hard to think that one is going to be able to save that amount of money from the salaries and living for a deposit.
On the other side of the coin, Joe, and I'm going to ask you a question that's always baffled me. Maybe you'll have the answer, I don't know. But the other side of it is Kensington's W8 postcode. House prices there over the same time, since December 2021, have climbed by 23.1%. With the current average house price of 2 million sitting at, get this, 29.2 times the average household income in that postcode, which is up 5.5 from 23.7 in December 2021. My question is, I mean, clearly this is a lot of foreign investors, and at the top of the chain, there are plenty of people who are making good money off of a cost of living crisis, I suspect, or foreign investors who haven't had that impact on them, and they've got cash to buy these properties. Clearly, that's happening, but there are people that live in that postcode W8 who don't earn that kind of money, and they're having to find, even if they're not finding the 29.2 times their salary to buy a property in W8, they're having to rent a property, and the rent will be related to the cost of the building in the first place. How do these people that earn an ordinary salary afford to live in W8? I've never understood it.
Yeah, well, as you say, there is a mystery to that, and the mystery is that it is London, or it is the city that allows people to earn colossal amount of money. You'd be quite surprised now, Paul, when you look at the average household income is probably now circa about £30,000, and in most parts of the country, and that could be a collective income of maybe £45,000 per couple if they're working and have a family. A single person in the town can earn, and especially with obviously good education, good background, etc., are on six figures. They are circa £100,000, or the late 85, £90,000, which are numbers that just don't equate to folks like me in the time, because we never thought that those were the numbers that were achievable. But younger generations, with the new modern technology and to achieve the things that they need to do, are earning a lot of money in order to be able to accommodate that. Of course, this is always fueled by the international, and the thing is, international crisis. So whether there's a crisis in the world, wherever the crises are, people tend to run to places like London for safety. And that pushes prices up a lot because they're coming in with cash. They're not actually having to borrow. So the people that are genuinely working are having to borrow a lot to get on the run of the property ladder in London. But they're not, poor in the sense that they're not able to earn that money. There is the capacity to earn six-figure sums, and I've spoken to many younger people who almost, are paying. I mean, not on a monthly basis, Paul, but in some cases they are paying maybe anything between 800 to £1,000 a week as a rent for the right kind of property that they want to be in. And some of that is supported by the companies that they might work with. Some of it is supported by international, and if the internationally a company has hired you from America or any of the other larger operators, they will pay for that. So that's why there's always an increase. And I mean, if you may remember when we discussed this subject about house prices dropping in London in throughout the pandemic, because obviously everybody was just legging it out of London. They were like, oh, I want to get out of here. It's just not happening. And then I said to you then that this is just a short dip. And the minute the doors were open for the international travelers to come back in and invest, here's the result. W8 is now at, a colossal increase. And of course, they charged in as soon as they could and picked up those bargains and looked at it. I mean, when you think that, a property I think recently was marketed in Regent's Park with 4 or 5 acres, and it was, sort of £1 billion, £4 billion or something, some ridiculous amount of money for the sale of that particular property. You ask yourself, you could buy half a country in some. In fact, you could probably buy a country in some other places for that amount of money.
Yeah,
But the reality is that somebody pays it, and there are many reasons for those people wanting to be here. Number one reason is security, believe it or not. People feel safer walking around, despite what people say about stabbings and this and that going on, and congestion charge and the zone that now has got lots of poisons in the air. I mean, people want to be here with their children for the education, for the right reasons, and it's number one is safety and security. And believe it or not, when you get crises across the world, as we have got all over the place, those families, those wealthy families, arrive in places like London because they know that they're not going to be kidnapped. Kidnapping is a big thing. For example, in other countries, people, poorer people, or people kidnap a rich person's child and hold them to ransom. So what they do is they'll pay silly money to be in a safe place, because at the end of the day, ultimately, they want to be safe with their children. So London's really been attractive to a lot of foreigners for that reason alone, just security.
Yeah, we've seen that all through the time we've been doing Property Matters, haven't we? That London always seems to buck the trend across the country. But there are those bargains out there, and we thought it was our duty to let you know. So LL46 is the postcode in Gwynedd. It's Harlech and Llanfair, which actually, do you know what? I'm quite taken with it, I have to be honest. But all joking aside for a second, Joe, you wouldn't, from the advice you've given us before. So, here's me thinking, right, I'm going to go get myself a little rental bargain up in LL46. It's not necessarily good advice, is it? Tell us why.
Well, primarily, I mean, I think it's a downsize the type of operation. I don't think it's going to, I mean, unless there's a big enough town nearby that attract people to rent it, your money's going to be on Airbnb rather than on a rental. So, and that becomes seasonal.
Yeah,
I know
you've got Cardigan Bay next door, haven't you? So that's, clearly.
Yeah. So, I mean, I know of a client that we sold for who has invested in an Airbnb in Wales and has done really well. And she'd never been to Wales. That was her point. She'd never been to Wales, went there one day and bought a house. And, it was a bit of a long shot, but anyway, she's done well with it. And Airbnb is what's make it work. So that's, I mean, if you're looking to invest, you've got to be there. But then, of course, the problem with Airbnb is you've got to find the support network to make sure that somebody goes and cleans it, deals with it, turns it around, etc., etc. And that's not going to be for you if you're sitting over here in London or the home counties. Then it's not going to be. But in terms of rental as an investment, you will have a lot of void periods, because it's not going to be always someone that's going to go, right, I'll be there for a year, and then for another 6 months, may not find the right person. So for those reasons, probably not a great investment opportunity.
One thing I find amazing is that the 3 properties that we mentioned, the restored chapel and the terraced house and the detached house, they were all photographed on a day with blue skies. I didn't think you got blue skies in North Wales, but either that or they've got some software that puts the sky on afterwards. Maybe that's what they do. I don't know.
Yeah.
But to conclude on this, so there are places where you can get bargains, but of course, as we'll find out in our final story today, it comes to when you can afford, if you can afford the mortgage, because again, we're looking at rates going up, but we'll come to that in just a moment. So our second story that we're going to look at today is all about the property auction market. So there was a notable rise in property activity in March as more investors, including buy-to-let landlords, turned to auctions across the UK to dispose of properties. The residential property sector was particularly busy, with lots offered up almost 45% as the recent hike in the interest rate and the introduction of yet more punitive rules and regulations encourage more investors to reduce their exposure to the housing market. So here's the little graphic that we had. So this is the details here. So overall, National Auction Analysis says that the lots offered in March were up 38%, 3,684. January to March up 35%, April to April 16.6%. So residential, 44% increase in March, 40% across the first quarter, and over the year 18.4%. But then if you look at commercial, only 5.2% up in March, 6.9% across the first quarter, and across the year 6%. So clearly it is the effect of landlords selling residential property by the look of it, and commercial not that much more affected by any assessment.
Yes, so auction is a fantastic and great method of sale. I think it's actually underestimated. People don't actually know it. Most people believe that auction is a route or a method where it's like the last resort. You've got to go there because you're desperate to sell. That's not the case. It is a great method of sale and it works for ordinary market. The problem we have at the moment is there is a great supply. The supply is perhaps for auction purposes overvalued, and the reason why it's overvalued is because the interest rates have now shot up and there is not enough return on investment. So if you're buying a property that has been let and it's got a tenant in there, the tenant is probably at this moment in time on an short-hold tenancy agreement, not paying perhaps what could be the current rate. However, if you're going to borrow money to buy that, then you're going to actually end up almost paying for the person to live in the property. And that is why there is an influx, and that's part of the reason why a lot of buy-to-let landlords are coming to the market and saying, well, if I can get out, even if I can get my investment back out of it, then I can actually rethink about how I'm going to invest that into another property or another project or another area. So whilst there is an up on that, if you look at the stats that we've just been talking about, it's actually minuscule in commercial, and it's probably quite a high drop in the residential, primarily because there's more residentials coming on, but they are actually not selling as much. So if you then go to the next point with that particular part, they will tell you that yes, there has been lots of activity, lots more people coming on the market because of the buy-to-let, but equally auction rooms are not selling as much as they probably could or would do, because they can't afford to sell them. Our clients who are instructing us are not in a position to be able to sell for less than what is outstanding. So it's a case of, do they, suck it and see it and go for a long play, because even refinancing of it is out. So the interest rate hike has caused huge problems. On top of all of that, our beloved Mr. Gove is doing as much as he can to make sure that people come off the buy-to-let route. What these people don't understand is the more landlords that come off it means that there are going to be more homeless people as time goes on, because nobody else is going to invest in this program. So, they've definitely got that quite wrong. But auctions are busy, but perhaps not getting the results that we want to get.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The figures here, I mean, if we read further down to percentage sold, so lots offered were up in March 44.8%, but the percentage sold fell by 11.4%. And if you look at that over a quarter, the first quarter of this year, it's 9.9% that the number of properties sold, or the percentage sold, goes down by 9.9%. And over a year, the number of sold properties is down by 8.5%. So auction rooms are flooded with properties for sale. Landlords want to get out. Nobody's buying.
And the reason why they're not buying is because there's no return on investment. If it was a vacant property, then yes, people will go, right, I can buy that, and I'm a cash purchaser. I don't need to go and buy this with a loan. so I can afford to buy that. But then if they're vacant and they're cash, so that's the sale that's happening. The one that has got tenants in it, and someone's got to borrow money to buy that, that is a no deal. So it's just not going to happen. It's not going to sell. So those landlords are having to sit on it longer, so yeah, it's shortened. So the amount coming to the market is high enough, but the amount actually selling is not sufficient.
It's a great time to be a cash buyer, isn't it?
This is a buyer's market. This is what they call a buyer's market. So, and especially cash is king. So if you've got the cash, offers that are coming in for properties that we're selling are, quite strongly lower because they believe they can and wait for it. But it just depends on that circumstances of the seller. If the seller has borrowed money that is over and above the value, he just can't afford to sell it because he's got to then pay the balance from his own pocket. Well, part of the reason he's probably selling it in the first place is because, he doesn't have the balance. He wants to get his money back. But if you're not going to get your money back, at least, then you're not going to be selling it. So yeah, we're at a bit of a crossroads, but I'm sure it won't last long. We get through these things. We can get through pandemics. We can get through interest rate hikes. We've been here before, and I'm pretty certain we'll get through it as time goes on.
Our final story of the week, major blow for homeowners as interest rates set to hit 5%. You did predict it, Joe. Economists have warned that Britain faces another painful interest rate hike to try to bring it back down to double-digit inflation. Or bring back down double-digit inflation, I beg your pardon, bring it into single figures. Inflation has been over 10% since last summer, and the latest data released this week, of course, from ONS, revealed it stubbornly remained there at 10.1%. This bolsters the case of economists to say more interest rate rises are likely to get inflation under control. And of course, wages are up 6.6%, of course, which they didn't expect. Adding to the market expectations that rates will rise with fresh fears that they could hit 5%. So you did predict it, but it doesn't seem to be looking good for Mr. Sunak's pledge to halve inflation this year.
Yes, I mean, obviously, from my point of view, I've always felt that 5% was going to be the benchmark ultimately. And I know when in our discussions, I remember you saying to me, well, that's probably about the most negative you've ever been. And it wasn't the case of being negative. It was the case of that's where I saw it ultimately ending up. And, it seems that that's where it's going. In terms of halving, I don't think he's going to halve it because he's not in control of the world problems that we have. The world problems are that everything has gone expensive at a time. The problem is that he's coming and holding a baby that has been messed up by his predecessor, and obviously with the breadbasket of the world, Ukraine in war, lots of issues are now coming home to roost. I don't think, and I don't believe that anyone else is going to do anything different. We already tried that. It's just that you've got to blame someone, and Mr. Sunak happens to be at the end of that line, and he's the one that's going to get the blame for it not going right or not going wrong, sort of thing. But it is where we are. It's not what we're going to be looking for. But I think that in a way, I wish they'd actually just got rid of this 5% business way earlier. And maybe we could have reversed things a lot earlier, but we're not in charge of that. That's what they're going to do. But in my prediction was that we'll settle at around 5%. So we're at 4.25. We'll probably get up to 4.5, and I think before the year is through, you're probably going to end up at that sort of level, and just hope that they can deal with this Ukraine war and see what the future lies. But the good thing about our business, the reason why I love what we do, and that is property, is that it's the safest and the most securest that you're going to get. Even though there are rates are high and costs are high, you don't happen to have a empty property if you don't need to have it. I mean, there are people that find money from where they want to have a roof over their head. And I've seen that even more recently when I find that we're looking at rental properties, 2-bedroom rental properties at sort of £1,600 to £1,800. I mean, it's just unheard of. These properties were £1,000. They're now double the money to rent. But when you want a roof over your head and you want food on the table, you're going to go to the troubles of whatever you've got to do. And people are doing 2, 3 jobs at the moment in order to make sure that they can accommodate for their family and cover the cost of living that they'll do. I remember, I'm sure lots of people, if they were listening, will come in and say that we remember, 15 and 18% interest rates at one time. And, those were pretty dire days. But house prices have gone up, but we don't see that. That's the problem we don't see. What we see is obviously the everyday cost, but what we don't see is that you may have bought your house at, I don't know, let's say £200,000, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and that's now worth probably double that money. So there's equity in that. You would never have saved that money if you were asked to save it over that same period. On an ordinary thing. I mean, if you're earning lots of money, then of course you can afford to save lots of money. But those on the average, and we talk about the average person in the street who's just trying to get his ordinary life done, have done well in equity gain throughout their property. But that sometimes is like an undercurrent. It's like a hidden thing. You think, okay, well, I bought that at 200,000. It's now maybe worth 500,000. So there's the £300,000 gain. Yes, there's a mortgage on it. I've paid the mortgage, but there is something there that you've got to fall back on, and that's why property is always, in my opinion, a good place to do. And in the UK, we've known for all the time that I've been in the business that it's what everybody's wish and desire is. At the moment, it's rental, but the minute the rental can turn into a home ownership, those people do. They want to have their own place.
I remember my first mortgage, 74,500, my first mortgage, and rates were 15%. The interest alone was £868 a month. I remember that from the very first monthly payment I made. And that was on those dreaded endowment mortgages, and I still had the endowment to pay on top of that, which I think was another £30 a month, if I remember rightly, something like that. But interestingly, talking about the headline rate, that actually is coming down. And interestingly, also the energy costs are coming down, the petrol's coming down, the fuel is coming down, should I say. Clothing, furniture, and household goods are increasing at a slower rate, but it's the food that seems to be off the scale. 19.1% increase year on year, the highest since August 1977. And I remember my old nan used to come back from doing the shopping. Oh, they've put 2p on beans, or all, cauliflowers are up 3p. I always remember thinking, well, have you got nothing better in life to worry about? But I find myself now doing exactly the same thing in the supermarket, coming back and saying how much cat food's gone up, for example. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, people that got pets are suffering hugely, and the pets are suffering. I mean, that lots of people haven't even identified that to a point where, I was reading an article where the dog homes and the cat homes are having people are having to literally part with their pets because it's another cost that is costing. Again, these are all bits that we think we'll do, but sometimes it's a case of your own family and your kids. So we are where we are at this moment in time in the life cycle. But you're absolutely right. You look at your parents, and I remember everybody here. But what was the old adage, Paul? You save the pennies, and the pennies save the pounds situation, or something like that. And so
look after the pennies, and the pounds will look after themselves.
Yeah. And so now when you hear yourself saying that, you do remember your parents saying that to you. You don't do this and you don't do that, and you go, no, you don't know how it works. We know how it works, and now here we are, X, Y, Z years later, eating humble pie and going, they were probably right, but we didn't want to tell them that, did we?
You probably need to amend it now. Look after the pennies, because I haven't got any pounds left. Anyway, on that bombshell, I think that's where we will finish for today. I hope you enjoyed watching Property Matters. Thank you, Joe, as always, for your input. We'll see you again for another Property Matters next week, same time, same place.